Okay.
This is an interview at the New York State Military Museum, Saratoga Springs, New York. It is the 12th of July, 2005, approximately 10:15 a.m. Interviewers are Wayne Clark and Mike Russert. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Yeah, Daniel E. Delor. I was born in Rhinebeck, New York, on April 27th, 1949.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
Just high school.
Okay.
High school graduate.
All right. Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted.
Why did you choose to enlist?
Well, I was aware, of course, of what was going on in the world, and I knew several people who had graduated ahead of me in different years, and they'd gotten drafted. And I wasn't going to go to college, so I knew where I was going to end up. So I went to the recruiters and talked with them, and they said, "What would you like to do?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to fly." And they showed me the program, the Warrant Officer Flight Program, that if I met all the conditions, the physical conditions and everything, I could, they would guarantee I could start flight school. Of course, finishing it would be up to me. So I enlisted about 3 weeks before I graduated. I went up, came to Albany, took the physical, flight aptitude tests, all that stuff, passed everything fine. And then there was a date of entering the service, which was, I don't know, somewhere near the end of July. It was about exactly a month from my graduation date. I graduated in June.
Of what year was that?
67.
Okay. All right, so directly from high school, then you went into the Army, into the
That's correct.
training program.
Right, right.
Where did you go for your training?
Well, of course, basic training was Fort Polk, Louisiana. In July, that's a fun place. Then I went to Fort Walters, Texas for 5 months.
What type of aircraft did you train on?
Oh, initially it was OH-13s. And then my advanced flight school training, that was at Hunter Army Airfield, Fort Stewart, Georgia. And then we were in the Hueys.
Mm-hmm.
We finished up in the Hueys, and that was what they call the tactical training.
When did you switch over to the OH-6?
When I got in country, I got to Vietnam. I come into Benoit, was there overnight, and then they took me north to Chu Lai, the 123rd Aviation, and I stayed one night there. And a Jeep came over in the morning and said, "We need you in F Troop." And I said, "F Troop? Yeah, right."
The old television show.
How am I going to write home and tell my mother I'm an F Troop? They took me over there, and the CO said, we need scout pilots." And I said, "Yes, sir, whatever." And they trained me right there.
How long did that training last?
4 or 5 days.
That's all?
Well, you know, the basic rules of flight, you know.
Right.
And it's just being checked out in the aircraft, basically. And after that, of course, I flew left seat observer status for 2 or 3 months before they let me fly missions on my own, before they made me aircraft commander.
Can I go back a second?
Sure.
Between your basic and your training at Stewart, how long was that training?
Well, of course, basic training was 8 weeks.
Right.
Fort Walters, primary flight school, they called it at Fort Walters.
Mm-hmm.
That was 5 months, and Fort Stewart was 4 months. So it's 9 months of flight training.
Right, okay.
So you didn't go to Fort Rucker at all?
No, they were splitting them up at the time. They needed helicopter pilots, and
Mm-hmm.
Rucker was full. So they were splitting them up. Some were going to Rucker and some to Hunter.
Okay.
Looking back on your training, how do you think did it prepared you for actual combat, actual flight in Vietnam?
Well, none of us there were under any illusions. We knew where we were going.
Mhm.
I kind of figured that out quite early when they sent me to basic training in Fort Polk. I said, boy, they're sending me to a jungle somewhere. I can see this coming, because that's Fort Polk is a swamp.
Mhm.
The flight training itself, it was good. The basic part of it, of course, is just basically learning how to fly, and then the tactical part of it. The tactics were fine. Of course, once you get to Vietnam, you put all that in the back of your head, because that's all different. Tactics change depending on the situation.
Did you find that the training, your initial flight training, was adequate for Vietnam? I mean, did you fly a lot of instruments, or was it mostly just basic flying?
The flight training was quite good, and
Mhm.
we didn't get into instrument flight until the second part of our tactical training in Georgia. Then we did a ground approach with hoods on and things like that, and then instruments only, cross-country night flights. The training was quite good,
Mhm.
quite good. I've never had a complaint about that.
Okay, so you, how did you get over to Vietnam?
Well, after a 2-week leave, I reported to, I think it was Oakland, California. And they loaded up planes and they flew us over. It was a Braniff commercial jet. We stopped for fuel in Guam, and then right to Vanuatu, which is right outside Saigon.
What were your first impressions when you came off the plane?
It stunk. The smell. And afterwards I found out why it smelled. It was from the burning crap cans that they have to burn every day. But with the humidity and everything just stayed right in the air. That was my first impression, was, whoa, does this place stink?
Now, you said your first combat was about 5 days after you arrived?
Yeah, that's a guess. I don't remember exactly. The very last day of my checkout in the Loach, we flew a mission, and we got shot at that day. So that's the first time.
Now,
I came
for
under
someone
fire.
that doesn't know, what is a Loach?
Light observation helicopter, LOH. Just pronounced as a Loach. That's what, it was the OH-6A.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
No, did you take any hits on that mission?
No.
What were your feelings like in that?
I don't remember. The first time we took fire, in fact, I don't even remember me knowing it until the pilot started his evasive maneuvers and the crew chief started to fire out the door, and the smoke grenade went out. And it was only after a minute or so that I realized that we had been under fire, because I had never heard that before.
What was life like, daily life like there?
Well, compared to most people, I had it made. We were in Chu Lai every night, which was a main base. We had hooches, tin roofs, big side panels opened up for ventilation. We each had our own separate little cubicle with a bed and some plywood nailed up for a desk, and a chair, and a metal locker. So as far as that goes, compared to a lot of people, I had it made. I wasn't complaining.
How about your food? What was that like?
Well, different. Well, that's where I got hooked on drinking coffee, because the breakfast was so bad. I had come from eating bacon and eggs and pancakes to baked bacon when it's so hard, it's, if you touch it, it's going to crumble, to powdered eggs. And so I started to drink coffee. Lunch times, I didn't eat many lunches there because we were usually out in the field then. Dinner at night, sometimes it could be quite good, but then they got on a roast beef binge, and you're smiling. He knows.
Oh, yeah.
And of course that was, they cooked that till it was, you know, like the bottom of my shoe. And I don't know, you just buried them with ketchup or anything you could get your hands on to change the taste. But it was healthy and there was plenty of it. I mean, we never ran out.
Did you carry any sidearms? Or
Oh yeah.
what did you carry?
Yeah. Pilots were authorized either a 45 or a 38 revolver. Authorized. It wasn't too long before I asked some of the other scout pilots why they were carrying other stuff. And after one of the fellows got shot down, I realized why they were carrying other stuff. In that area, because the United States had shipped a lot of arms over there before we even went in, there was every type of gun imaginable. So at one time or another, I carried a grease gun. Then I had a Thompson 45 with the stock taken off of it. Then I had an M16. This stuff it was just traded around from one guy to the next. It wasn't, you didn't go to supply and get one. I ended up carrying a captured AK-47 with the stock taken off of it. Just for the idea, as I was over there longer and longer, I got smarter and smarter. I figured if I'm going to be shot down and I have to evade, I'm going to need something I can get ammunition for. Well, there's very few M16s out there in the bad guys' hands, but they all have AKs. So I figured if I needed ammunition, hopefully I could shoot one of them and get his ammunition. And that's what I was carrying, plus the revolver. We always carried the revolver, or the 45.
Did you wear a flak jacket at all?
We had regular flak jackets, like the infantry wore, but we threw those in the bubble down by our feet to hopefully slow down any rounds that would come up through the bubble. We wore a chicken plate, ceramic, big thick ceramic discs that you put on over your head in a vest type thing. And supposedly they would stop a 30 caliber round at 100 yards. I don't know. I never had to find that out. But yeah, we all wore something.
Now, how often were your missions?
Oh, it varied an awful lot. We had visual reconnaissance VRs that we did on a daily basis. The troop did. Whoever flew a first light mission, the first one of the day, we alternated. We always had 2 teams, so we just alternated. Sometimes I would fly 7, 8, 9 days in a row, and other times I would fly just 2 or 3 days in a week. It also depended on the personnel we had and what was going on. Sometimes it was very, very quiet, and we just did a few VRs, and it was really not much to do. And other times we had infantry units and things in contact and things like that, and we flew much more. So it varied a lot.
Did you fly mostly with the doors off?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, never had the doors on. Even our lift platoon, they had the doors off.
Mm-hmm.
The only ones that didn't were the Cobras, and they suffered because of the heat.
Mm-hmm.
No, we had to have our doors off because we would shoot through them. We kept a red smoke grenade hanging from the pin on the bungee cord, and if we took fire, the crew chief grabbed that and pitched it out to mark the area, and then he would open up with his M60, and the door gunner or observer, left seat, he would open up with his M16 just to hopefully keep some heads down, and the pilot would call taking fire, and the Cobras would roll in and And after we were out of the way, then we would readjust for the cobras. From my smoke, I took fire, X number of meters or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then the cobras would work it over good. And sometimes, well, most of the time, the scout would go back in and take a look afterwards. If he took fire again, well, the cobras worked it over again, and by the time they were done working it over the second time, I'd already called either the Air Force or artillery or something, whatever was closest. I'd get some arty on the target or some fast movers on it, some napalm or bombs or something. I don't imagine it was a very pleasant thing to be on the ground and shoot at a loach. It couldn't have been.
Did your unit suffer a lot of casualties and losses?
In spurts. The unit was there from 67, that's when it was formed. No, 68, excuse me, 68. It was formed from C Troop, 7th to 17th, part of the 1st Cavalry Division. They took some of those people and put some new ones with them, and they reactivated F Troop, 8th Cavalry, which had been in World War II in Korea, and it left in 73. Of course, it had moved around the country a lot in that time. In that time, they lost 30-some, 32 or 33 or something to that effect. I don't remember exactly. While I was there, we lost, well, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 people.
What was your call sign?
I was Blue Ghost 16. In fact, some of my friends I know still call me 16.
What were the majority of your missions? Would you say?
Visual reconnaissance was most of them.
Okay.
Fly out, find the enemy, or find signs of the enemy. Sometimes you didn't find them, but you saw where they had been, or what they were doing. Maybe they were digging bunkers, or digging pits for the 50 calibers, or you saw that type of activity, and that was all reported. And sometimes they decided to shoot at you. And then you say, well, I found them. There. But occasionally we had other missions. Ash and trash missions, I think I flew maybe 1.
Now, what do you mean by ash and trash missions?
Oh, administrative things, taking stuff out to some unit in the field or something like that, not a combat assault mission. I didn't fly many of those at all, because while I was a Loach, I was a scout pilot. If there were any of those to be done, the Hueys usually did that.
Mm-hmm.
What were your officers like within your unit?
Well, I have to say they were stupendous, because I was one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, okay.
What else can I say?
Yeah.
I would say about 99% of them were really good people. They cared about their crews, and they cared about their job. And they were human beings. They were personable. Occasionally, you met one that was a warrant officer and thought he was a general, but as long as he did his job when he was out there, and of course back at night, people kind of just stayed away from him because he was. But that wasn't the usual. Normally, the guys would get together at night, and they might have a few beers or something like that, or play some poker. No, they were good, and I don't know, I've known a lot of enlisted men that served with us. Over the years, they've been in touch with me. And I don't know of any of them that have a real complaint with the officers.
Do you have any incidences that stand out as being maybe something that was humorous, something that was stood out more than others? Or a mission that stood out more than any other?
Well, there was one mission that stood out. In January of '69, I had a brand new lieutenant flying left seat. Of course, I was aircraft commander, even though he outranked me. He was going to be the platoon leader. In fact, for administrative purposes, he was the platoon leader. He did all the paperwork. But we never took anybody, no matter what his rank, and just put him in an aircraft and let him fly. He had to be taught. And we flew over a small little village. It had maybe half a dozen hooches in it. We'd flown over it before. Going to another place to do a BR, we just flew over at high speed, and we took one round, one shot Charlie. The round came up through the bubble, went through his right leg, and hit on the inside of my seat armor and put shrapnel in my left arm from the steel jacket. Well, we got him back, got that taken care of. First of the first Cav came through. They were a mechanized unit. They searched the village, couldn't find anything. Over the next couple months, every once in a while, somebody would fly near that and they'd get shot at, one shot. We didn't have any more casualties out of it. So it was in the summer, I don't remember the month. What would be summer here? With daily briefing, I had seen this ship off the coast, because we were right on the coast. And I said, I don't know what that is, but that's big. And we were told that morning that the battleship New Jersey would be in our area for about 3 days, and then it would move on to another place up and down the coast. And we had their frequencies, and we could adjust. If we needed them, we could call them for fire support. And they had a range of about 8 to 10 miles inland. So I got my books and everything that day, and my pin flares and morphine packet. And we happened to be going out near this same area, and I didn't fly right over it, but I flew close to it along the side. And sure enough, pop, one shot. And I said, that's it, I've had it. I climbed up to altitude, and I called the frequency they'd given me. A very, very southern voice comes on. Fire control, yes sir, what can I do for you? Told him I had a fire mission. Gave him the coordinates. And he said, we'll adjust with 5-inch. I said, okay. So we moved to the west of the target because they were to the east of us. I was not going to get near that GT line. And he said, 1 away. And he said, 2 away. And I'm up there. Of course, we're about 3,000 feet by then. We're up high. And I'm waiting and waiting. It seems forever. And then there's an explosion down on the ground with white phosphorus. There's a marking round. And then the second explosion hits, and it's on the other side of these. The accuracy, I must have given them good coordinates because their accuracy was unbelievable. They had one on each side of this little group of hooches. So I told them, I said, you've got one that's 20 meters long and one that's 20 meters short. Fire for effect. And he said, sir, would you like 16-inch? And I said, oh yeah. I'd never seen that. You know, that's stuff you see in movies on television. And he did the same thing. He said 1 away, 2 away, 3 away. They shot 3. And once again, there's the wait. You're waiting, and you're waiting, and you're waiting. Seems like forever. And then the first one hit, and the second one, the third, right behind it. And there's nothing but dust and straw in the air. And he said, and I was shocked. And I said, you're on target, repeat. So they put in 3 more. And then I thanked them, and we went down and looked. The hooches were gone. There was a little stream that ran out of the mountains. The stream had stopped flowing. There weren't big craters in the ground, like I expected. But there was literally nothing but dust and straw. Now, whoever shot at me, he would have had to get underground real deep. But we never had a problem there anymore. In fact, the hooches were never rebuilt. All the rest of the time I was there, that little pocket stayed just like it was. It was very impressive, very unusual. But yeah, I would have to say, adjusting gunfire for a battleship is quite unusual, and it's something to see.
What, did you ever have many contacts with the local people at all?
Some. In Chu Lai, they hired hooch maids, girls to come in. They did our laundry, they cleaned.
Mm-hmm.
They came in every day. The officers' club, well, there were several of those on that base. They had a couple of girls that would get you beer if you wanted to sit out on the porch, you know. Not any people out in the field or anything I never had any contact with.
Mm-hmm.
Just those.
How about with the Vietnamese Army at all? Did you ever have,
As little as possible.
or was that?
There were some units of them that were very, very good. Some of the Ranger units were excellent, excellent units. They could rival anything we had. The majority of the South Vietnamese Army weren't worth much. If we were supporting them and they took fire, they'd run rather than fight. The rough puffs, we called them, regional force and popular force troops, it's kind of almost like a militia. They were the worst of all. If they went through a little village checking it out, they would just kill everybody. Everybody. I saw that several times. But if they took fire, oh my God, unbelievable how fast they'd run away. So, the South Vietnamese Army, I wasn't impressed, you know, in general. Like I said, the Ranger units, they were something else. They were really good.
Were there any racial problems within your unit?
No, never had any. We had whites, we had blacks, we had some American Indians. We had Latinos. I mean, there was everything. It was a typical unit. And I never heard or saw of any racial problems at all.
Any drug problems at all?
Yeah, we did have a little bit with some of the enlisted men. We had, of course, an air cavalry troop has a scout platoon, a weapons platoon, or a cobra platoon, and a lift platoon flying Hueys. And then we had an infantry platoon. So we actually 4 plus headquarters. Some of the infantry platoon, they had problems with them, with marijuana. But I never saw anything with any of the officers or heard of anything like that.
Now, you said for a time period you were the platoon leader. Why was that, and why was that unusual for a warrant officer?
Well, of course, a warrant officer is kind of a specialist. He has a job, and that's his job. Platoon leader status, thing like that, that's for a lieutenant, maybe captain, and then it works its way up. During the time I was there, we had 7 different platoon leaders. One of them got wounded. Well, the fellow that was with me in January, of course, he left. We had another one that came in, and we couldn't teach him how to fly. He could not fly a Loach. I don't know how he got through flight school. So they moved him to headquarters company. None of the pilots that tried to teach him how to fly would release him to fly. They said, we can't release him. He's too dangerous. It was attrition, I guess, is the reason I would have to say. It was very common for platoon leaders maybe to fly scouts for 6 months and then go to weapons or something like that for another 6 months to split their tour up. That was very common. I became platoon leader because I was senior pilot, and we were out of other officers. There was nothing left but warrant officers, and they made me platoon leader. It was about 30 days.
Yeah, how old were you at that point?
At that point, I think I was 20. I was 19 when I went to Vietnam as a pilot.
How long were you in Vietnam?
Well, from September '68 to November '69. I heard once through the VHPA, Vietnam Helicopter Pilots Association, that the youngest pilot to serve in Vietnam was 19 years and 3 months old. Well, I was 19 years and 5 months old. So I was close. Skinny little kid.
Now you won a Silver Star. Could you tell us about that?
No, not the Silver Star. I got the,
I saw that.
my Vietnam campaign medal has a silver star
Oh, okay,
on
I
it,
see that.
designating
Okay,
designating 5 different campaigns.
sorry. Okay. How many missions would you say you had?
Well, I still have my flight records home. I could probably count them up.
Approximately.
Well, I had right around or a little over 600 hours of combat assault time, and that's mission time. That's not training or anything like that. That's combat assault. And the average mission lasted approximately hour and a half, somewhere in there.
Could you
We had some that go 2, maybe 3 hours, but after 3 hours we needed fuel. And some that were shorter. When the Bob Hope show came in Christmas, December '68, I didn't get to see that. They had to have someone flying reconnaissance out around the mountains to be sure there no rockets or anything got put on top of them. And those were short missions. They were only about 45 minutes, and then somebody else came out and took over and flew about 45 minutes. Those were shorter ones. But
Did you ever get to see any USO shows while you were there?
I saw 1 or 2 USO shows, yeah. I really wanted to see Bob Hope, but I never got to see him. Yeah, they had, the USO was there quite a bit in Chu Lai, and I did get to see 1 or 2 of their shows.
Do you want to tell us about the mission you flew where you were wounded?
Which one?
Well, he was wounded 3 times. You know.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize it was
In
3
January, I got the shrapnel in my arm.
times.
That was a very minor thing. I call that my John Kerry Purple Heart. In February, I got shot through the foot. That was a little more serious, but I was quite fortunate.
How long were you out of commission?
About a week. The round came up through the bottom, through the bubble, missed the flak jacket, of course, that I had put down in there. And it came out through the top of my boot and out through the greenhouse past my head. And when I got back, I flew back. I had a new pilot with me then too. He was going to be another one was going to be our platoon leader. And he kept saying, "Are you all right? I'll take it, I'll take it." And I said, "No, I'm fine." And he said, "You sure you don't want me to take it?" And I said, "Look, I don't want to die, new guy. I'll take it myself." I shouldn't have said that. He was a good guy too, and I'm still in touch with him. That laid me up for about a week. I was quite fortunate. They cut my boot off there at the aid station at Hawk Hill. And I'm laying down on a stretcher, and I hear one of the medics say, "Boy, is he lucky, it went right between his toes." And I sat up and said, "What?" He said, "Lay down." And it had gone through the meat, like between the webbing. That's where it had gone. It had gone right through there. It hadn't broken anything. So they shot me full of penicillin and everything else, you know, be afraid of infection. Because the germs over there are as big as your fist. So, and I hobbled around on crutches for about a week, and they put me back on flight status. And in November of '69 was the third one. That's the one that took me out. I took a round through my flight helmet. And that was, we crashed with that one. Because I couldn't, it really rang my bells. A round came through my flight helmet, went alongside my head. Didn't break the skull, but it cut it wide open just like you take a knife, and it just popped open. And I had quite a concussion. And when that happened, I couldn't, my hand came off the stick and it went like that, and I couldn't get my hand back on the stick from the concussion, you know, and we crashed. We were taking fire all over. I mean, that was, I don't remember how many holes they told me was in that aircraft. And we crashed, and my observer pulled me out. And our lift ship came in to pick us up. They were taking fire. They got us, they threw me on the floor of the Huey. And at the time I thought they weren't being very polite about it, because they literally threw me. And they took me right to Da Nang. That was the closest hospital to us at that time. So, but I survived it. I mean, no broken bones.
How long were you hospitalized?
Well, from there, I was in there about a month. That was in the 7th or 8th of November, I think, of '69. 7th or 8th, somewhere right around there. They evac me to Japan for further tests because that head wound did get infected. And they were packing it and everything every day and changing the dressings. And in Japan, they started doing other tests on me. My vision stayed the same. My hearing took a big hit, especially in my right ear. So they decided to ship me back to the States. They sent me, I came into, excuse me, they came into San Francisco, or Oakland. And from there they flew me to St. Albans Navy Hospital down in New York City. Queens, I guess it is. I got there, and that was the 17th of December is when I got back in New York. And they told me to, well, go on home and we'll see you next week. They had a schedule. Once a week I would have to go back down there. I would walk in, they'd say, how are you? Fine. They'd take blood or do something like that and send me back. That went on for a couple years before they decided what to do. They put me on a temporary disability retirement list because they didn't quite know. And then they finally called me in and they said, we can do one of two things with you. They said, you can't fly anymore. Your hearing's too bad. I was having a little problem with vertigo, dizziness. And they said, that's from the concussion. And they gave me some pill, I don't remember what it was now. Just take one of these a day and you'll probably be all right. Well, I had been. They said, we can do one of two things. You can stay in the service. I mean, we're not kicking you out. Your wound isn't that bad. But you can't fly. I said, well, yeah, and as a warrant officer, I'm going to end up in supply or something. I'm not going to spend the next 20 or 30 years handing out bed sheets. If I can't fly, I'd rather get out. And the doctor says, fine, that's how I'll write it up. Because it was right on the border of what they could do. And I knew that as the war was winding down, there'd be a riff anyway, because I knew they'd be real heavy on warrant officers. They'd have way too many, that they'd get rid of them. And they did. There was a riff. They reduction in force, they have to do it. And being not 100% perfect physically anymore with hearing problems and things, I know I would have been one of the first ones that they got rid of. I beat them to it.
Were you aware of the anti-war movement?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we were very aware of it. There was a Armed Forces Radio Network. They had a TV station in Da Nang that we could pick up, and some of us had. Seems like I don't know who they ever belonged to, but it seemed like one person in each hooch must had a little portable television. And of course, Chu Lai was quite a bit south of Da Nang, but the land was flat. It was right on the ocean, so we could pick it up with those little rabbit ear antennas. And so yeah, we saw it. We knew what was going on.
What were your feelings?
I thought it was ridiculous. My mother, of course, wrote to me, and she wrote things like, I wish this war would end, which is understandable for a mother. The Jane Fonda thing of going over to North Vietnam really irked us a lot.
How do you feel about her apology?
I don't accept it. It's funny, I had somebody, a fellow next door to me down there in Arkansas. He said to me, "You heard Jane Fonda's apology to the veterans?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "What do you think of it?" I said, "That's no apology." He said, "Yeah, well, the war's over." I said, "Yes and no." I says, "It won't be over for me until I'm gone. It can never be over for me. I mean, I don't live it every day or anything like that." I said, "But it can't be over. It's something you cannot forget." And I had an uncle in World War II, and he said the same thing. He said, "You can't forget it. It's impossible. You put it way in the back of your mind, and you live your own life, and that's what you do." And that's, of course, that's what I've done. But I always figured that Jane Fonda, being that Hollywood type and everything, that they're basically leftists, and they're basically pro-communist, and she obviously was. And it's just, how can you take her seriously when you're over there and communists are shooting at you and you're fighting communists? You can't. You just can't take it seriously.
When were you finally discharged?
Officially, August of '73 is what my paperwork says.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do after you were discharged?
Well, I went to work for my father in electronics business, so I was an electronic technician. And I had a couple other jobs too on the side. I worked 2 jobs for many, many years. Got married, had 2 kids.
Did you take advantage of the GI Bill at all?
No, I didn't.
Did you join any veterans organizations?
Oh, maybe 15 years ago, my wife's uncle talked me into joining the VFW up in Newcomb. They were trying to get a chapter going, and they needed one more person to have the initial head count. And I said, "Yeah, sure, Reg, I'll join." I went to a couple meetings, but then I moved. So I haven't joined anything. Well, yes, I have. I joined the DAV, Disabled American Veterans. I joined them down there in Arkansas.
You belong to the VHP, right? Vietnam Helicopter Pilots
yes.
Association?
Right.
Did you ever stay in contact with anyone that served with you?
Yes.
That you served
Yes. In 90 or 91, I had wanted to find Joe Loadholtes. He was one of our crew chiefs. Him and I hit it off real well. There's a thing with certain people that you get along with almost instantly. He was from Florida and I was from New York, so we're worlds apart as far as the country goes. But we hit it off real well, and he was a very excellent crew chief, very conscientious. But he would laugh easy and joke. I wanted to find him. I didn't know where he was or what had happened. I knew he was from Fort Myers. I called Fort Myers information. They told me they had one Loadholtes, which is an unusual name. I called that, and it happened to be a sister who had just gotten married and hadn't changed her name yet. Otherwise, I wouldn't have found her. Yeah. he had gotten out of the Army. He'd been drafted. He'd gotten out of the Army, was going to college, did not like what was going on in the colleges. The political activism was too much for him. He couldn't handle that. He went back in the Army, finished his college while he was in the Army. He said, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. He went to Ranger School, OCS, and when I caught up with him, he was a major at Fort Belvoir, Virginia. And we, next week I had a vacation coming. I took the time and I just went down and knocked on his door. My wife had a fit. She said, you just can't drive someplace and knock on somebody's door. I said, he'd do it to me. And we did. We had a good time. And since then, some of the other fellas have been in touch with me. They started a little organization, F Troop 8th Cav Vietnam Veterans. And we have reunions every year. I don't attend all of them, but I attend a lot of them. And I've met a lot of the people that served with me. Some of the pilots, some of the crew chiefs, some of the maintenance people. And it's nice to see those old faces, even though nobody looks like they did. You know, everything's different. You don't recognize anybody without a name tag. You know. But yes, it's good because we all have something in common, and we can sit there and talk and have a beer and reminisce or whatever.
You ever read any of the books or watch any of the movies on Vietnam?
A couple. I saw Apocalypse Now. That was a little weird. I watched one, this is several years ago, and I can't remember the name of it. See, that happens when you get a bullet alongside your head. Some things stay right in your memory and other things go. Two actors, one of them rapes a girl. Michael J. Fox, he's one of them. I don't know the other one.
Oh, yeah. What was that one?
Oh, the other one is that. Can't think of his name. That wacko that just came back from Iran. Sean Penn.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the name of the movie.
No, I can't either. I never seen it.
missed that one.
It was kind of I thought, you know, this is really making people look, it's making veterans look bad. And then I saw the shoulder patch, and it was Americal Division's shoulder patch, which was my unit.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, yeah, they're still after us. And I haven't watched too many since then. It's not.
You ever read any of the books or at all?
I've read a couple. The one I enjoyed the most, because I could understand it, We Were Soldiers Once and Young, Al Moore.
Mm-hmm.
I did fly in that area several times. We were way out of our own AO, because that was way south of us, but we were pulled down there. So when he talked about that mountain and stuff like that, I'd seen that. I knew what he was talking about. And I understood the disposition of his forces and things. That was an enjoyable book as far as being able to understand it and what they did and their reactions. And in fact, I've read that one twice. A lot of information in that one. That's almost a primer for anybody that's thinking about military. They should read that.
How do you feel your time in the service affected or changed your life?
Well, it's one of those things, you know. When I came back, my mother said, "You've changed," and I said, "No, Mom, you have." So you know what that is. Yeah, I was about 20 years old, probably going on 40, maturity-wise. Certainly didn't feel like 40. I mean, I still felt like I was 19. You grow up real quick. I don't have any hard feelings towards the military or the government. I never have had. I think some of the leaders did some really stupid things. But I'm not, as far as wanting to protest the war or anything like that, no, that's, I don't know, I guess I grew up, I don't know.
Okay. All right, well,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much for the interview.
Okay.